a few different people have asked me to comment on this video put out by Dennis Prager, who is a conservative talk show host. Some very, very well done flash animation explaining Israel's side of the story, which is fair enough. And basically the tag that I've gotten along with this from the Twitterers is, yep, my dad sent me this. This is what America's conservative dads are emailing around to each other. Just to remind you, in case you needed to, a reminder, let's just go ahead and reinforce our illusions and that kind of thing. So that's cool with me. Let them try, and I will try to explain. The first thing about it is that I'm really not an expert on Israel-Palestine. I know a lot about the politics of it here, but the point is you don't have to be to debunk this crap. Anybody who takes an honest assessment of the situation whatsoever will be able to raise any of the objections I'm about to raise themselves, and they're all argument-shattering ones. And so, I guess, believe me now, hear it in a minute. But I don't claim to be the world's expert on this the way Prager does, but I can still correct him. And then the other thing is, and you heard Ray mention this earlier, it's just like you see on Perry Mason, or God forbid, if the state gets their grubby mitts on you and you end up in court, you're sworn under oath, if you testify, to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, because a lot of partial truths can amount to, or even one partial truth can amount to a gigantic lie if all important details are left out. So, no excuses. You got to provide all the context that, determines whether your conclusions are right or not. Otherwise, it's not a fair argument. It's outside the rules of argument. So, the rules of evidence. So, I'm not perfect, but I try to incorporate the best of my opponent's arguments on my show as best I can all the time. In order, that's the only way I can be right, is if I make sure to change my mind as soon as I find out I was wrong. I got to try to find out I'm wrong all the time in case there's a problem. It's kind of my job, so I think that's how we should all take these kind of questions up. So anyway, again, right now 532 Palestinians dead, 20 Israelis dead. 80% of the Palestinians are civilians. 94% of the dead Israelis are soldiers, including 2 Americans, which maybe I'll have time to get to that point later on. But anyway, first of all, here is this Dennis Prager flash animation video going around all about explaining the case for Israel, basically. And apparently this is about a year old, and it's making the rounds again in your conservative father's email account. So here we go.
Easiest conflict in the world to explain. It may be the hardest to solve, but it is the easiest to explain. In a nutshell, it's this. One side wants the other side dead. Israel wants to exist as a Jewish state and to live in peace. Israel also recognizes the right of Palestinians to have their own state and to live in peace.
All right, so there's so many assertions in here, I think I have to stop and go through them kind of one at a time. You notice what all he's skipping there is World War II and Zionism and the foundation of Israel and how the hell they even got here at all. It's simply just one side is, I guess, possessed by evil. And so, therefore, they're just determined to never compromise. They only want to kill the other side. And if anyone wanted to say, to make an argument in this about, one side simply wants the other's this or that, the answer is one side wants the other's land. And they've been taking it, and they're still taking it. And apparently they're willing to kill a hell of a lot of them to continue taking it. But all that is just completely left out. All you need to know about Israel is they just want peace. Accept that as premise number one of this entire argument and forget anything about how we got here, at least for now. At least while we get you on Israel's side.
The problem, however, is that most Palestinians and many other Muslims and Arabs do not recognize the right of the Jewish state of Israel to exist.
Oh, yeah, see, and then he ended. See, I already let him go on too long before I stopped him. He ended by saying, and Israel's totally for the two-state solution. They've always said there should be a Palestinian state. It's just that the Palestinians refuse to recognize the right of Israel to exist, he claims.
This has been true since 1947, when the United Nations voted to divide the land called Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state.
All right, now, it's just not true. In fact, all the Arab states in the region recognize Israel and their right to exist, including the Palestinian Authority since 1988 or 89, and including Hamas since at least 2006. I've seen Hamas on the Charlie Rose Show saying, of course, and we've said it again and again and again, will recognize Israel's right to exist within 67 borders.
What's your strategy to end the occupation?
نحن نرحب أن تنسحب إسرائيل إلى
حدود
عام 67 بطريقة سلمية.
If Israel withdraws to the borders of 1967 peacefully, without bloodshed and away from wars. And we think that this option can be achieved if the United States of America interferes and the international community strongly in order to oblige Israel to do so.
Just saying, end the occupations of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. They're not just saying that, but they're not saying Israel has to stop existing. That is not part of Hamas's demands, even Hamas's demands. But meanwhile, all of the Gulf states and Egypt and Jordan are friends with Israel. So it's just not true.
The Jews accepted the United Nations partition, but no Arab or any other Muslim country accepted it. When British rule ended on May 15, 1948, the armies of all the neighboring Arab states, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Transjordan, and Egypt, attacked the one-day-old state of Israel in order to destroy it.
Right, because they are evil and hate Jews, I guess. Except, of course, what he leaves out is that the Israelis weren't abiding by the UN partition plan whatsoever. They changed the demographics on the ground from 56% of the land to 78% of the land. And before the invasion, it had been 9 months since the UN mandate, and there had been civil war that whole time. And 750,000 Arabs were turned into refugees. They were forced out in what's known as the Nakba. Now, Dennis Prager can just completely leave that out. He doesn't address it, and so you're left to just, I guess, presume that it's a land without people. There are no other reasons that the neighboring states attacked other than the British left, and so they had their chance to kill all the Jews because they just lived to kill Jews, I guess. He doesn't say, but you're left, again, to infer, to presume. Because he doesn't say there'd been a war going on for the better part of a year, and the Palestinians were being massacred and completely uprooted. And almost 1 million of them were turned into refugees. And now that doesn't mean that the leaders of all the Arab states were a bunch of angels at the time. Again, we're talking 1948 and that war. The British sock puppet Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan had its own interest for wanting to take the West Bank, for example. But for Prager to just pretend that there is nothing that happened on the Israeli side, that they had not done anything to anyone, the UN partition plan that he just mentioned, he doesn't need to go back and talk about how the Israelis refused to abide by it themselves from the very beginning. And were simply engaged in ethnic cleansing of the people of Palestine. But nope, they just invaded for no reason because they're jerks.
But to the world's surprise, the little Jewish state survived.
Plucky little guys.
Then it happened again. In 1967, the dictator of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser, announced his plan, in his words, to destroy Israel. He placed Egyptian troops on Israel's border, and armies of surrounding Arab countries were also mobilized to attack.
It's quite simple, you see, when you leave out entirely the other side of the story. Quite simple. So he's talking about the 1967 war. Everybody was poised to attack, but Israel attacked first. Here, I guess I'll let him finish. I had to hit pause at everyone was ready to attack Israel.
However, Israel preemptively attacked Egypt and Syria. Israel did not attack Jordan and begged Jordan's king not to join the war. But he did. And only because of that did Israel take control of Jordanian land, specifically the West Bank of the Jordan River.
All right, now, I got to admit, I don't know about the detail about the Jordanian king at that point. But I do know that I'll refer you to Murray Rothbard, War Guilt in the Middle East, that he wrote in the summer of 1967 about the 67 war and how Israel started it. And so if you want a much broader context of what was going on there, someone asked me on Twitter, hey, can you tell me about the 67 war? Let me see. What's probably the best thing to do? Oh, I know. I'll put in Murray Rothbard 67 war and see what I find. Blam. So there you go, of course. But then, more important than Rothbard is this primary source. This is a speech by Menachem Begin, the former prime minister of Israel, and it's from the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs website. No lie, you can look it up yourself, pick a few choice words I say and Google them, and you'll find it at mfa.gov.il. It is the website of the Israel Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Menachem Begin says, in June 1967, we again had a choice. He's talking about wars of choice, various ones. Previously, he's talking about the Sinai Peninsula one. The Ike Eisenhower and the Suez Canal crisis with the British and the French. All right, in June 67, we again had a choice. The Egyptian army concentrations in the Sinai approaches do not prove, said Begin, that Nasser really was about to attack us. We must be honest with ourselves. Not anybody else, I guess. We decided to attack him. This was a war of self-defense in the noblest sense of the term. The government of national unity then established decided unanimously, we will take the initiative and attack the enemy, drive him back, and thus assure the security of Israel and the future of the nation. We did not do this for lack of an alternative. We could have gone on waiting. We could have sent the army home. Who knows if there would have been an attack against us? There is no proof of it. There are several arguments to the contrary. While it is indeed true that the closing of the Straits of Tiran was an act of aggression, a casus belli, there is always room for a great deal of consideration as to whether it is necessary to make a casus into a bellum. And then so he continues. And so there were three wars with no alternative from his point of view, the War of Independence, the War of Attrition, and the Yom Kippur War. And it is our misfortune that our wars have been so. In the other two wars, the wars of choice, the Sinai Campaign and the Six-Day War, we had losses like those. Again, those are the wars of choice, according even to Menachem Begin. Quite contra Dennis Prager here.
Shortly after the war, the Arab states went to Khartoum, Sudan, and announced their famous 3 no's.
Oh, yeah, see, here's the other thing. He says, and only because Jordan intervened did Israel take the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Okay, maybe, but still that was in 1967. And he just lets it, as though your brain can't come up with the question yourself. But yeah, what about since then? They get to occupy it forever now? They won it in a war, and then so what? they get to just hold the people there as prisoners forever, and their children and their grandchildren. Really? It's a very simple case when you just leave out all the details.
No recognition, no peace, and no negotiations. What was Israel supposed to do?
Even still, he's only talking about the mid-1970s, and I'm sure that ain't the whole story of then, but again, I'm not the expert. But even then, that position all changed by the end of the 1970s.
More than a decade later, in 1978, was to give the entire Sinai Peninsula, an area of land bigger than Israel itself and with oil, back to Egypt, because Egypt, under new leadership, signed a peace agreement with Israel. So Israel gave land for the promise of peace with Egypt, and it has always been willing to do the same thing with the Palestinians.
So, first of all, on the Egypt thing, that was the Camp David deal, where America agreed to pay them both $3 billion a year forever and protect the Egyptian military dictatorship forever in order to bribe it into not attacking Israel. And then, obviously, the Israelis didn't really want the Sinai, or they wouldn't have given it up. They gave it up under American pressure, but, it clearly was not a priority of theirs. He makes it sound like it's some gigantic sacrifice of them. And I don't know how much oil is there, but look at the way they treat the Gazans now because they want that natural gas so bad. So don't tell me how altruistic the Israelis are when it comes to giving up resources because they just desire peace so badly. And, of course, American support for the military dictatorship in Egypt in order to keep the peace between Egypt and Israel is a big part of the motivating factor for the September 11th hijackers and Egyptian Islamic Jihad, which merged with bin Laden and the Azam group to create al-Qaeda in the first place. Of course, all the lead hijackers were from Cairo, and that's what they were about. Was hating their dictatorship and hating Israel and hating America for supporting them both. So, not that Israel's part of America or anything. So as long as, there are no consequences for Americans that we ever have to consider here, including how much it is to pay both of these countries $3 billion a year to not go to war with each other with all the weapons we've given them both, then I guess it's all fine. But otherwise, we have to start tallying the costs like September 11th and its aftermath.
All the Palestinians have ever had to do is recognize Israel as a Jewish state and promise to live in peace with it.
Okay, now see, that's just a damn lie. And, of course, the way he works in the Jewish state thing there is to obscure the fact that Yasser Arafat and his guys, again, said that they were willing to recognize Israel within 67 borders, that is, give up the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, but otherwise, back in 1988. And Hamas has been willing to recognize Israel's right to exist at least since 2006, and they've said so repeatedly. And they say, oh, no, it's in their founding charter or whatever, that Israel must be destroyed or whatever. Well, it's in the Likud Party's founding charter that all of the West Bank is Judea and Samaria and belongs to Israel, and that they'll never have a Palestinian state there. That they'll all have to go eventually. And, in fact, Netanyahu's coalition is with people far to the right of him who would outright annex all the West Bank and expel the Palestinians and have said so. Anyway, sorry, I'm short on time.
But when Israel has proposed trading land for peace,
and then they work in the Jewish state part because they know that's a deal breaker because there's so many Palestinian Muslims, Arab Muslims that are Israeli citizens that already have second and third class Jim Crow status. And I'm not even talking about the occupied. I'm talking about within Israel proper. That they're saying that the people of the West Bank would have to go ahead and endorse that situation. When it's completely a red herring, and it's a brand new one, relatively speaking, just in the last few years under Benjamin Netanyahu, that now you have to talk about just how Jewish the state is, too. Because, all their demands all this time that the Palestinians have accepted all this time, not good enough. Got to keep moving those goalposts, always.
2000, when it agreed to give the Palestinians a sovereign state in more than 95% of the West Bank.
See, that's a lie, and you can read Robert Malley, who worked for Bill Clinton during those negotiations, who wrote in the New York Review of Books all about how the American side was working for Israel the whole time. The offer that Arafat supposedly couldn't refuse but did anyway was actually absolutely horrible and had the West Bank divided up into tiny little Bantustans like it is now forever. And Benjamin Netanyahu, the current prime minister and then prime minister, or no, it was, I guess, Barack. But anyway, Netanyahu's on tape talking about how he screwed Bill Clinton and about how he told Bill Clinton one thing while he was doing another. Oh, yeah, all we need is a little bit of, a little area C here and a little area B there. And what he really meant was the Israelis will never, ever leave the Gaza Strip's eastern border. The Jordan River Valley must belong to Israel forever. And by the way, all the settlements in the West Bank stay, and all the walls and all the Bantustans and all that stay. And it's nothing like a Palestinian state ever. Just like Netanyahu, when he's lying and saying he wants a Palestinian state, he describes it as something that's not a state at all. Only when he's being candid and he doesn't know he's being recorded, he's laughing about it. And he says that he was warned to not provoke the Americans this way. And play Bill Clinton the way he was doing it. And he said, he's quoting himself, his response is, "Don't worry about the Americans. 80% of them support us. It's absurd." Oh, no, I missed a part. Don't worry about the Americans. They are easily moved. 80% of them support us. It's absurd, Netanyahu said. He can get away with anything. Don't worry about that. And, oh, you want a narrative? Here's a simple little narrative. Israel tried to make a deal, but Arafat just wouldn't take it. Isn't that easy to memorize and repeat? Doesn't matter if it's true or not.
And all of Gaza, the Palestinian leadership rejected the offer and instead responded by sending waves of suicide terrorists into Israel.
Right, and no mention of Ariel Sharon deliberately going to the Temple Mount and deliberately provoking for his own domestic political reasons the Second Intifada.
Meanwhile, Palestinian radio, television, and school curricula remain...
Well, and no, you know what? And no mention of the fact that, okay, yes, right, if he was being the slightest bit honest here... Okay, yes, the Palestinian people of the West Bank and East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip, they have been under a foreign government's occupation this whole time. But it's still all Arafat's fault or something, right? But the Palestinians still here are just invisible. That there are people here who, for longer than the Soviet Union occupied Eastern Europe, they have been occupied by the Israeli military and National Police Force.
Filled with glorification of terrorists, demonization of Jews, and the daily repeated message that Israel should cease to exist.
Right. Just like in Israel, where they celebrate militarism endlessly and have conscription, demonize Muslims and chant death to the Arabs in the streets and act like Muslims and Arabs have no rights, aren't really human. And therefore, if we want what they have, we can kill them and take it. Oh, because, boo-hoo, poor us. The people that we're occupying and imprisoning are resisting, so we're the victims. Because that's what terrorists they are. That even when they're completely subjugated, they still try to fight back. Why won't they stop? And then, Israel can't exist. Standing in for get out of the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem.
So it's not hard to explain the Middle East dispute. One side wants the other dead.
One side wants the other's land.
The motto of Hamas...
And are steadily colonizing on it. They're massive colonies the size of towns on the West Bank. They monopolize all the water resources. I mean, some of them are the size of towns that it's pretty hard to imagine them ever going away. You're talking about colonies on other people's land.
The Palestinian rulers of Gaza is, we love death as much as the Jews love life.
Oh, that may be true, but so what? That doesn't mean anything. that in the most desperate circumstances, the most right-wing reactionary religious militia comes to the fore in the Gaza Strip prison? So, when everybody knows that their job is controlling the people of the Gaza Strip for Israel. Hamas is a tool, at least in effect, of the Israelis as much as the Palestinian Authority on the West Bank is. And yes, it's true. You can read Andrew Higgins in the Wall Street Journal, and you can read Richard Sale in UPI all about how the Israeli government encouraged the rise of Hamas as a right-wing religious alternative to the PLO to help split Palestinian power between right and left and between Gaza and Palestine, just as they, at least in effect, engineered the election of Gaza back in 2006 by withholding all the tax revenue from Fatah and the Palestinian Authority, the Arafatites, so they couldn't buy all the votes that they needed to win.
There are 22 Arab states in the world, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean. There is one Jewish state in the world, and it is about the size of New Jersey.
And at this part of the video, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, they're colored in all the way blue. Greater Israel. That is Israel. It ain't occupied territory. It ain't disputed territory. It's Israel, says Dennis Prager. And because some Arabs live in other countries, then that means the Israeli Jews can kick all of the Palestinian Muslims out of Palestine, their country. The Palestinians' country. Right? You see how that doesn't make any sense at all. But it's stated with such confidence and ease that, hey, yeah, why can't all the people from Gaza just go move to Iraq or, kill themselves if they're in Israel's way, right?
In fact, tiny El Salvador is larger than Israel. Finally, think about these two questions. If tomorrow Israel laid down its arms and announced, "We will fight no more," what would happen? And if the Arab countries around Israel laid down their arms and announced, "We will fight no more," what would happen? In the first case, there would be an immediate destruction of the state of Israel and mass murder of its Jewish population. In the second case, there would be peace the next day.
Oh, God. What a joke. Well, your flash animation of your little peace dove really convinces me. Except that no one is saying, no one, not even Hamas, is saying that all the Israeli Jews have to die or go jump in the Mediterranean Sea and never come back. Not even Hamas. Nor the dictatorship of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, Yemen, Jordan, Egypt. None of them are saying that. Nor is the Palestinian Authority on the West Bank. And no one is saying that all Israeli Jews must disarm and become complete and total pacifists and let themselves all be murdered. At the hands of which foreign armies are supposedly coming for them now again? What a joke. Again, all just a red herring. All a stand-in for the occupation and subjugation and torture and murder of the occupied Palestinians of the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. That's pretty much the deal.